I could see at least two teams missing out with a winning record. Houston and Kansas City.
Really, it's going to be a battle of the two offenses in this case. So I predict a high-scoring game.
This is what they get for firing Brian Flores. You remember that 2021 season when the Dolphins won 7 in a row with Brian Flores just to get booted out of the playoffs and then terminated on Black Monday. Why would they even do that?
Offseason in terms of talent-wise, when they got Tyreek Hill, so they had the right talent the following year. If they had the exact same offseason with Brian Flores as the coach, how much different would have it gone? I don't know if we necessarily would have.
It would have been way different if Brian Flores.
It would have been better.
It would have been different with Brian Flores because he has a winning culture defense, but the offensive was pretty much god-awful.
Back in, like, say, Madden, the original Madden 25 franchise mode, it would have been generated during one of the off seasons. You get a random, like, Kurt Warner coming out of retirement or Ray Lewis coming out of retirement storyline. Good evening, folks. This is the first time we have the new intro for NFL Pick'ems, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Agent Warrior X. We're fresh off a more consistent Week 15, but there's still a lot to talk about from Week 15. The playoff picture is becoming a little more clear now after the week. As you notice, the Grinch attire is gone. The Eagles jersey is back.
I could tell. Season's greetings and happy holidays, sports fans. This is your co-host, Agent Warrior X, and today is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Now, Week 15, in my opinion, was one of the greatest weeks we have ever had in a very long time. And I called it a while back. I could see two teams missing out of the playoffs. I see Houston and Kansas City. Kansas City was one of them. The last time they were eliminated was in 2014. You had LeBron James returning back to the Cavaliers. You had GTA 5 released for the new generation consoles, and of course, 2014 was a solid year because I graduated middle school to high school. And on top of it all off, that year was the same year that either Dallas, Washington, or Philly won the division. I kid you not. Surprise, surprise. We still have the number one overall pick. Yep. I was wrong about the Commanders showing up with Marcus Mariota. Apparently, I was right about the Washington's defense being somewhat good. Meanwhile, Jackson Dart, despite the interception, he looked very solid. There was a lot of miscues during the first half, and the second half was a lot better. Ultimately, Younghoe Koo, as of today, is now officially released for the New York Giants. Who could be our kicker? My only thing is going to be Justin Tucker, former Baltimore Ravens kicker, and he was really good before the allegations.
And it's interesting. Well, for the Giants, what you really need is a head coach, really. That's the one thing you're missing. You got to go through the offseason, find a coach, and then start to build from there. Through free agency, the draft, and then so on and so forth, the long rebuild process.
It's not just the head coach we're looking for. We need an offensive coordinator. We need a defensive coordinator. We need another receiver to complement Neighbors just in case he goes down again. We need another shutdown corner to complement Paulson Adebo or Cordell Flott just in case either one of them goes down again. And we need an offensive tackle. So that's pretty much 4 or 3 things we need for this offseason come the coming weeks. And I love the holidays are my favorite time of the year because Christmas is next Thursday.
That's right. We got a little over a week away. And with the NFC East being this talking point here, the NFC East is all but official at this point. The Eagles will win the division if one of two things happens. All the Eagles got to do is win one of their final 3 games. That's Saturday against Washington, Week 17 against Buffalo, and against Washington to close it out. Or the Cowboys got to lose one more game and it's over. Just one of those two things, possibly both happen, and it's over. Eagles win the NFC East.
The last time the Eagles repeated was in 2004. And you know what happened that year? The Boston Red Sox came back after the Yankees were up 3-0 in the ALCS. The Detroit Pistons were NBA champs where Big Ben Wallace was on that team against Kobe Bryant and Shaq. And of course, other things happened, including the Patriots winning the Super Bowl.
Yep. A lot has changed since then. Now the Eagles are fresh off a Super Bowl win. They're the defending Super Bowl champs. They are looking vulnerable, but despite, looking like they're going to be the first team since then, not just to repeat NFC East champs, because every year since 2005, it's been a different team each year winning the NFC East. And it looks like we're finally going to get some consistency by having the same team win back-to-back years. And speaking of potential consistency, we could see the Houston Texans win the AFC South for the third straight year, or the Jacksonville Jaguars win the division for the first time since 2022.
I could see Jacksonville winning it. I could see Jacksonville winning out and clinching the playoffs and potentially the AFC South for the first time in 3 years. And this started when the Titans had a late season collapse before everything fell apart. As for the Jaguars, well, let's just say Trevor Lawrence has officially become a lot better when Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter, before he got hurt, was actually a lot better. As for the NFC East you mentioned earlier, the last time we won the division 20 years ago, when you guys repeated, was us in 2005. Then in 2006, you guys won the division. So if the Giants clinch the first overall pick for the first time in 50 plus years, I think this Giants team could potentially be stacked for years to come, similar to the Cincinnati Bengals. If they lose out for the rest of the season, they have a shot to win the number one pick.
And for the Cincinnati Bengals, their reboot starting in 2020 started off on the right foot, but now it's going the opposite direction. You got to wonder, how much longer will Zach Taylor have as the Bengals head coach? Will Black Monday be the day he's axed? Because the Cincinnati Bengals were one of two teams shut out. Them and the Las Vegas Raiders both got shutouts. We had two shutouts in the 1:00 spot on Sunday. It's been a long time since I remember there being two shutouts the same week.
I really don't remember that, but all I know is this. Come the AFC West, there will be a new champion. It's going to come down between the Broncos and the Chargers. For the AFC South, it's going to come down to the Texans or the Jaguars. For the AFC East, it's going to come down to the wire between the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. That comeback that Buffalo did reminds me of one specific team that I remembered, and that is the Buffalo Bills from the 90s. When you had Jim Kelly and that defense. Flipping heck, even one of the Eagles fans had mentioned earlier that defense was actually elite, but ultimately coming up short to nearly all NFC East teams. Now I will say this. After Washington, you're not beating Buffalo. After Washington, you're not beating Buffalo.
And it's interesting we talk about that. Those were Buffalo, New England was a memorable game, a great game, and a fun matchup. So that's still on the line. Most likely the Patriots will win out, but we'll have to wait and see. And as far as the AFC West goes, there were two ACL curses involving the AFC West in some way, shape, or form. First, Patrick Mahomes goes down for the season, the final nail in Kansas City's coffin for the season. And then in the Denver Broncos victory over the Green Bay Packers, unfortunately, the Packers suffered a huge blow. the MVP of their defense, Micah Parsons, down with an ACL injury, out for the season and a playoff run as well.
I kid you not. I honestly feel bad for the Packers fans because the fact that they traded Micah Parsons to the Cowboys, ultimately for the Cowboys, they finally realized that it wasn't good enough for them to trade their best defender to the team that they never beat. But ultimately, we have a lot of injuries this year. We had Tucker Kraft out for the year. We had Micah Parsons out for the year. Mahomes, one of the few greatest quarterbacks of this current modern era, out for the year. Malik Neighbors, out for the year. Scatterboo, out for the year. And last but not least, the worst of all I can ever think of injuries is Daniel Jones from the Indianapolis Colts. And he magically, in my opinion, he magically did better. Ultimately, he's coming up short, but the wheels came off at the worst time possible. And adding Phillip Rivers wasn't really the best. And I'll tell you why. He's 44 years old. I understand we drafted him, but we traded him for the Chargers. You remember that trade, what we did with the Chargers with Eli Manning?
Yep.
Back in 2004, and look how that turned out. Phillip Rivers was great. Eli Manning was great, but ultimately he won 2 Super Bowls over Phillip Rivers. But considering how Seattle played out against Indianapolis, makes me think that this, in my opinion, was one of the few good comebacks, but ultimately coming up short to one of the few contenders for the NFC West. Speaking of the West, Thursday night's game is going to determine the division winner. This is going to determine who wins the division, which we'll talk about very soon. And as for the 49ers, no surprise. And speaking of quarterbacks, did you hear about Shedeur Sanders' Pro Bowl selections? Despite the fact that he was playing somehow terrible, a lot of people have been selecting him in Pro Bowl selections. You have other quarterbacks besides him. You have Drake May, Josh Allen, you have Bo Nix, you have Justin Herbert. I would rather take any of them other than Shedeur Sanders. Now, for the Giants quarterback, he's up and coming. He's similar to one player that we know the most, and it's not Mahomes. He's similar to Jalen Hurts. He plays like Jalen Hurts. He's similar to Jalen Hurts, and he makes play established time like Jalen Hurts.
I'm trying to register that one. Obviously, this shows that the Pro Bowl to some degree is a popularity contest. And with no disrespect to Shedeur Sanders, but he's still a rookie. And that's an insult to the quarterbacks who've been on the field carrying out their team this season. Now, that doesn't mean Shedeur Sanders can't go on to eventually have a successful career, but this season, it's not happening this season. He's only started a handful of games. If you're going to vote Shedeur to the Pro Bowl, wait till he actually proves something as an NFL quarterback first, which could be a year or two from now. But
give these rookies some time for development alongside Jackson Dart, because I have a feeling the 2 best rookies that we could potentially see is Tyler Shugg from the Saints and Jackson Dart.
And I'll say this, that Colts-Seahawks matchup, you go from the Indianapolis Colts being one of the great redemption stories to being one of the great tragedy stories, and the Seattle Seahawks in a tight race in the best division in the NFC. And it works out perfectly. Thank you, football gods, for starting off this Week 16 with this Thursday night matchup right here. Seattle Seahawks, Los Angeles Rams rematch.
This is going to determine who wins the division. The Los Angeles Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks were coming off a really good, gritty win against the Indianapolis Colts, spoiling the return of Phillip Rivers. The Rams on Game of the Week against the Lions. That trade for the Lions really helped out the Rams long-term and short-term. Sure, Jared Goff may have got back to the NFC Championship for the first time since 2018, but ultimately it wasn't enough against the Rams offense. And And as for the Seahawks, their defense is also great too. Considering how they have JSN and other players and Sam Darnold doing Sam Darnold things, but it's not going to be enough. This is the winner of this division, the Los Angeles Rams. Matt Stafford will continue to grind on to win the NFC West and win and secure the NFC West.
Man, I mean, this is a really good matchup. You got two really good teams. Seattle Seahawks with an excellent defense, a great mix of veterans and young players. The offense is hit or miss on certain weeks. Some weeks in favorable situations, like against the Titans, they're a hit. But in some situations, like last week against the Colts, even in victory, they weren't that impressive. And the first go around against the Rams, remember, Darnold had, 4 turnovers, I believe. And the Rams,
it was 4 turnovers.
Yep, and we've seen the Rams just continuing to find ways to look impressive, beating the Detroit Lions in a high-scoring game. Then against the Lions team fighting for their playoff lives, you had them destroy the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've taken out a lot of their teams. They put that first loss to the 49ers behind them, destroyed them in the rematch. Give me the Rams to do something similar against the Seahawks team. With all due respect to the Seahawks, they're a good team. Sam Darnold's been a good comeback story, but I think he's more like a modern Alex Smith, where he overcame looking like a boss to become a respectable quarterback, but was never truly elite. But with that being said, I'll take the Rams to beat the Seahawks in this game and build momentum.
That's exactly why Alex Smith got him to a Super Bowl, but it wasn't enough because the Steelers' defense was far elite than that.
And then you got Saturday, 5 o'clock. The Washington Commanders host my Philadelphia Eagles. What's on the line? Eagles win, NFC East.
I kid you not. This is not going to be ending well for the Commanders. We have the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Washington Commanders, the first Saturday game of the season. The Eagles were coming off a major win against the Raiders. This was no shocker because Pete Carroll has been very, very terrible. And as for the Commanders, well, let's just say the Commanders grinded it out. We've underestimated Marcus Mariota for quite a while now because the fact that he gave the Commanders an almost so close victory against the Denver Broncos on primetime, and on top of all that, they coming off a shutout loss against the Vikings the next week. Ultimately, for them, they bounced back against the Giants, potentially ruining their tank. So, if I had to choose one, I'm going to say that Philadelphia will repeat as NFC East champions.
Now, in this case, some people compared this Eagles team to the team from 2 years ago. And the one similarity they have is they had a really strong start and they had a bit of a skid later in the season. But here's the biggest difference. The Eagles, though they do have a softer schedule to close this season, A. B, their defense is much more disciplined and play a lot better under Vic Fangio than they were 2 years ago when they, mid-December, removed Sean Desai in favor of Matt Patricia and threw off the whole chemistry of their defense, trying to force the Eagles to adjust to Matt Patricia's style that late in the season. This time around, you have consistency and discipline with Vic Fangio. You're going up against a battered Washington team. I like the Eagles' odds in this one because and plus on the defensive side of the ball, they're battered. We see what the Eagles can do against a struggling defense like they did against the Raiders. So give me the Eagles to beat the Commanders, clinch the NFC East, and that's that. But then Saturday night, this is actually a good one. The Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers rematch. This time Bears host.
Oh boy. Now with that banged up defense of the Packers, it's going to be really tough. You have the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears. The Packers were coming off a tough loss against the Broncos. Rematch of Super Bowl 32, Super Bowl in the 90s, where John Elway was still at his last prime, while Shannon Sharp was getting multiple touchdowns against the Packers defense, while Brett Favre was doing his elite potential when he was in the 90s. The Chicago Bears, let's just say they're coming off a very good win against the Browns because Shedeur Sanders constantly throw interceptions. And I'm gonna be honest with you and say that, oh geez, my dad is here. My dad is watching the stream. Anyways, the Chicago Bears, in my opinion, could win the NFC North for the first time in a very long time. Give me the Bears over the Packers to assume to become the better North team. Bear down.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. I was thinking about it. I mean, the Packers defense without Parsons, and they've still got good players, so they're still a good team, but that's like the Chicago Bulls without Michael Jordan in the 90s. You still have Scotty, you still have Ron Harper, you still have Coach Phil Jackson, have a solid crew, but without Jordan, it's just not the same. And that's why I feel like here with the Packers defense. It's still a good team, but not the same without Parsons. And that's going to be a difference maker this time around that can open up the game for the Bears with Ben Johnson to get the win at Soldier Field in a close game, kind of similar to last time, but this time around, it's the Bears winning it.
Exactly, because the fact that the Bears have a much better offense than last season, which is going to be a lot more better.
Yep, and then we start off Sunday with the Cleveland Browns hosting the Buffalo Bills.
This is no-brainer. Buffalo Bills versus the Cleveland Browns. Buffalo was coming off a really great comeback against the Patriots. Cleveland, well, they're not a really great team. The only watchable player that's on that team is Myles Garrett, and that's pretty much it. I'm not going to waste further. Bills over Browns.
Yep, obviously. The Browns are just trying to get through the season. Shedeur Sanders is just playing to get some experience under his belt, and some of the Browns players are just playing for job security, while the Buffalo Bills are still fighting for a chance to retain their AFC East title, which they've had since 2020, and to get a home playoff game. So give me the Buffalo Bills to win this game and start using this as a warm-up for bigger and better things come playoff time.
Nikki, sorry to interrupt, but my dad said this. Bills are playing for the AFC, but that's not the case. They're playing for the division because the Broncos have a slighter advantage in terms of the streak and the record.
Yep, absolutely. But as far as the AFC goes, they're also going to need some miracles to happen too. They're going to need the Broncos and Patriots to take a few more L's for that to be a possibility. But they're going to go for it, definitely.
I kid you not. I still want the Bills to win the division to secure the continued winning streak.
Yep. And then, it could be the official end for the Dallas Cowboys. They're already 3 games back. Now they got to play the 10-4 Chargers.
Next up, we have the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Dallas Cowboys. The Chargers were coming off a really great victory against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Cowboys, well, that must-win game against Minnesota was very tough. But I kid you not. Considering how Dallas still has a perfectly balanced offense, but it's not good enough against the Chargers, because we've seen teams playing really well time and time again. But unfortunately, in terms of must-win situations, they're done. That Packers primetime game was a must-win, but ultimately it ended up in a tie. And as for the rest, not too surprised. So give me the Chargers over the Cowboys.
And here's another advantage you got to consider too. While the Dallas Cowboys offense has good pieces around them, the Chargers are one of the best teams against the defense in the NFL this season. We've seen them shut down, be pre-Patrick Mahomes injury. They kept Kansas City in check. They kept them in check week 2. Throughout the season, you haven't really seen a lot of teams do great against them in the passing game. So that's one advantage right there. And plus, with the Chargers going against that Cowboys defense, which struggled against J.J. McCarthy, struggled against Russell Wilson in week 2, struggled against Jalen Hurts week 1 in the first half, which neither team did anything in the second half. But point being is, I'll take the Chargers over the Cowboys because the Cowboys defense has been toast all season long. I like this matchup for Justin Herbert and the run-heavy Chargers offense. When you factor
And
in
plus,
their
Amarian Hampton has been a lot more better than the previous receiver they had.
He's back. They can't stop a new.
Jeremiah Smith has officially declared the NFL draft this year.
All right, there's your breaking news. Now next.
Well, I won't consider this unthinkable, but I see the Titans winning. Tennessee Titans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City, they still got a great offense here, but the way how Cam Ward's been playing, I'm going to say that this, in my opinion, is not going to be this close. Gardner Minshew is a solid backup at best, but sometimes he can't get the job done in crucial situations. And plus, the Chiefs are already out of the playoffs. So I got the Tennessee Titans taking out their frustration against the Chiefs.
Yeah, I could see the same here. I mean, Minshew to me, he's like a poor man's Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he'll occasionally flash some good, but you can't consistently rely on it. And the Tennessee Titans are pretty much dead in the water. Remember, Kansas City still has a decent team, so I'll take Kansas City to win this game, take out their frustrations on Tennessee and play for pride. Oh, boy.
Well,
go ahead.
Christmas is upon us. Next Thursday will be the greatest Christmas ever. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Holiday Tank Bowl. We got the New York Jets versus the New Orleans Saints. The Jets, well, the Jets are coming off a tough loss against Jacksonville because Jacksonville was the better team. Saints, they already blew up their tank. They don't need another quarterback because Tyler Shugg is proving that he could be that guy. But in terms of that, they need a receiver. But I will be honest with you. I got the Saints. Saints winning the Tank Bowl, but ultimately destroying their tank.
I'll put it this way. I got the Jets winning the tank. So in other words, I got the Saints winning the game. Because you're starting to see a little bit of a semblance of offense and some potential hope for the future. That remains to be determined. But when you compare them versus the Jets, their offense is at least showing some semblance. And they've got a sweep over the Carolina Panthers, who could be the NFC South champion, depending on how that division plays out. So at least they got something going. Whereas the Jets, they're in a complete free fall. Time to get ready for next year's draft.
I kid you not. Considering how the Jets blew up their tank, this was an immediate embarrassment. And exactly, my dad even knows that the Jets need a quarterback, which I agree with, because they need either Fernando Mendoza for Indiana or take Dante Moore from Oregon. Enough said. Next up, we got the New York Giants versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were coming off a very great win against the Commanders, but ultimately they were mathematically out of the playoffs because Chicago pretty much knocked them out. As for the Giants, well, let's just say Jackson Dart had a lot of miscues in the first half. In the second half, it was a lot better. And to top it all off, what was Mike Kafka doing? I'm going to be honest with you and say that if he continues to have concussions, I do not know what to do by then. So I know one of my good friends is a Vikings fan, but I'm going to put it this way and say that Dart should continue balling out until he's officially done for the year. But considering how the Vikings offense played last on Sunday night was amazing. However, considering the Giants could potentially lose out for the rest of the season, next week's game is going to determine who wins the Tank Bowl officially. Give me the Vikings over the Giants.
And to your point, you pretty much indicated that Mike Kafka is not the guy going forward when the Giants actually go for a real coach. he should just be thankful he even has that headset to begin with and enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to be for a long time, because the Giants are incompetent at this moment. Until they get
and my dad said this is be Dart's last game of the season. I highly doubt that, because if he ends up with another injury, I think at this point you should start Jameis Winston.
At that point, it's a Jaden Daniels, just shut him down for the season. You got nothing to play for situation. I know this is off subject, but with Jaden Daniels, the biggest difference between him and RG3 was the reason Washington kept starting RG3 is because they were making a push for the playoffs. And whereas with Daniels, they had nothing to play for, so you might as well just sit him. But I got as far back to the game itself. You got the Vikings and Giants. I mean, the Vikings, they are trying to win games. So I feel like you got that versus the Giants team that just has no direction. I think the Vikings, because I noticed now against some of the weaker defenses, J.J. McCarthy actually shows a spark and looks like he could do something. So I'd say against the Giants, it's a perfect opportunity for J.J. to have some shine and get his confidence going. And then we'll just see where he goes from there.
And not just that, if he puts himself in harm's way, then that's going to be a really tough situation. And I'm hearing a lot of rumors that the Giants should draft Fernando. I highly doubt that. You already got your guy. You already dressed in the running back situation. You already dressed in a wide receiver position. Now you just need to have Dart some help and protection, and also get potentially Cardell Tate from Ohio State. Oh, and Simon Chan VA, if you're watching this, may the best team win. Go Big Blue.
Oh, yep. Oh, that's going to be a good one.
By the way, my dad said he should have been out there with a torn ACL for RG3. I agree with that. And my dad even agrees with me saying that this team needs an O-line. The Giants need an O-line at that point.
And a great point, that whole RG3 starting, it helped them get to the playoffs in the short term, but it ultimately hurt them in the long term and set them back years.
This is literally the same mistake we did with the Commanders when they had RG3 on that team. We extended Daniel Jones, and it hurt us long term.
And now moving right along, this is
going to determine who wins the division the next couple weeks. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Carolina Panthers. The Buccaneers were coming off a very tough loss against the Falcons, which I predicted the Falcons was going to win it. The Panthers were coming off a tough loss against the Saints, which, by the way, that was a winnable game instead of the Saints destroying their tank. But this is going to come down to the wire come week 8. Panthers over Buccaneers in overtime.
Yeah, I know. It seems like everyone's thinking that popular belief that the Buccaneers are going to win this game, and that's understandable. They have the more established roster, but we've seen the chemistry starting to fall off. The team's collapsing. It's turned real dysfunctional in recent weeks, and the Panthers, they're actually starting to develop some chemistry and get something going. I like the momentum. Even with the loss of the Saints, I like the momentum the Panthers have built through the season, the way they're starting to come together as a team. So I'll take the Panthers, the more stable team at the moment, to get the win and ultimately win the NFC South and end the Bucs streak of winning that division.
But I kid you not, my dad also said that horrible owner Dan Snyder. Yeah, he was god awful in the late 90s or early 2000s.
Awful, absolutely dreadful. And then Panthers have to learn how to win.
Exactly, because there's no excuse for Carolina to lose winnable games. The same thing with the Giants did. The multiple opportunities that the Giants had this whole year, we could have been 10-6 this year. The Lions game was winnable. The Saints game was winnable. The Cowboys game was winnable. The Commanders game was winnable. And of course, what can I say about the Chiefs? The Chiefs was also winnable too.
Yep, and now you go from that. Now we'll have to see which team finds a way to win in this one. And now, oh boy, the Miami Dolphins versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
At this point, these two teams are tanking, but it's not really for the worse. The Cincinnati Bengals versus the Miami Dolphins. Joe Burrow was coming off a tough loss against the Ravens, which they never did anything at that point. Meanwhile, Miami, their season's over. Their season is officially over.
Yep.
And they're wasting. Yeah, exactly. And they maliciously ruined a power-hungry Tyreek Hill. And they should have never fired Brian Flores, which the intro was mentioned. They should have never fired Brian Flores, to be honest with you. But they went over the god-awful offensive lineman. The defense, however, was carrying the team. But ultimately, they won 7 in a row late season just to get booted out. All they had to do was just win out. But ultimately, they failed. So the winner, Cincinnati. You still got T. Higgins. You still got Jamar Chase. And you still got a solid offense.
And the crazy part is, with Mike McDaniel, they've had good talent on offense since that 2022 offseason. They've managed to waste that. They've done a poor job protecting Tua, and they've wasted the later years of Tyreek Hill's prime, and they've wasted the early years of Jaden Waddle's peak, and wasted potentially they did waste one of the most exciting offenses of recent years. And now this is karma coming back to bite them. And the Cincinnati Bengals, they're the same. But their problem is defense. They've wasted one of the most exciting offenses. And this one, no Tua, no shot. Joe Burrow in. Give me the Bengals to win this game.
Exactly.
Ooh, this is actually a good one. Broncos.
This could potentially be a playoff match. This could potentially be a playoff matchup. The Jaguars versus the Broncos. Trevor Lawrence. My goodness, he was coming off a really great win. The defense was coming off a great win too. Considering how Denver played out for the rest of the year, and especially that comeback against the Giants this whole season really sparked the momentum. On top of all that, the Broncos with PS2, Cortland Sutton, and you still got a really great defense with them. I could see this coming down to the wire between those two. If I had to choose one, Denver. It's about time someone else wins the division, and it's about time that someone else would carry the glory in their future. Broncos over Jaguars.
Yeah, I got to go with the Broncos in this one. Well, I like what the Jaguars have done in terms of a single season turnaround. I don't think they're not ready for the Denver Broncos yet. The Broncos are the more complete team, and I got them to be able to win this game, extend that to 13-2, and be one step closer to clinching home field advantage in the AFC.
Now that I think about the Broncos, the last time I remember the Broncos had a first round bye was it the 90s? Because I remember the fact that the Broncos was this good that the Broncos was this good in the 90s because they potentially won the division over the Raiders while they had John Elway and Shannon Sharp, and of course Terrell Davis. So I'm gonna put it this way and say that Broncos team is similar to what we saw in 96 or 98.
And remember, the Jaguars, for a team that just started off, they were really prominent in the late 90s with Tom Coughlin as the coach, Mark Brunell, Fred Taylor. You had Jimmy Smith, Keaton McCardell. That was a fun team.
It was, to be honest with you.
And they upset the Broncos in the 96 season in the divisional round before the Broncos won back-to-back Super Bowls.
And I'm glad John Elway retired as a champion. So does Peyton Manning and Shannon Sharp.
And now we get to move along. We got Cardinals versus the Falcons.
This is a tank bowl at this point. Cardinals versus Falcons. They already blew up their tank. Kirk Cousins. They were coming off a gritty win against the Buccaneers, which I'm pretty much surprised about. But it's really not enough because, again, why would you even extend Kirk Cousins if you already drafted Penix? And as for the Cardinals, I'm sorry, but as for the Cardinals, Jacoby Brissett at this point, he's a good backup, but I don't think Kyler Murray was really the problem. Kyler Murray, at that point, he need a fresh start elsewhere, but not on one of the worst teams in football. Give me it's going to be close between those two in terms of low scoring game, but give me the Falcons over the Cardinals to win the Bird Bowl.
Yes, I gotta agree with you. I think now you realize that Kyler Murray wasn't the biggest problem here. Maybe it's more to do with the organization. And they've been considered a, quote, poverty organization for years in terms of management and how they're structured, their facility. So that could spell to them being cheap in ownership. But that's a whole nother subject. But the problem is the Cardinals are a disorganized mess. And I think people are realizing Kyler Murray isn't the main problem. That's why he needs a new structure, that could actually help him out in the long term from a player standpoint, from a discipline standpoint, so on and so forth. Just a fresh start could do a 180. We've seen how that can help guys like Sam Darnold, a new start. Same with Steve Young when he went from Tampa to the 49ers. So a fresh start could salvage a quarterback's career. And the sooner for Kyler, the better.
I kid you not. When it comes to 180 fresh starts, I think they're wasting Marvin Harrison Jr.'s career on that team. I would be shocked if Arizona Cardinals decided to trade up with the Giants and get Marvin Harrison Jr., but I highly doubt that will happen.
Yeah, but I mean, it's almost like Larry Fitzgerald at this point, but at least Fitzgerald can say he started in a Super Bowl, so he wasn't completely wasted. But there are the similar parallels. Fitzgerald played on way too many losing Cardinals teams. He should have had more opportunities in the postseason. But as far as the Falcons go, I feel they're the better team, and that's not saying much, so they should win this game.
And by the way, you mentioned that Super Bowl against the Steelers, right? It wasn't even close enough. Speaking of the Steelers, this could potentially be inevitable between the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Detroit Lions. We've seen this movie over and over again like a broken record. Mike Tomlin could end up having a 9-8 AFC North team. The Lions were coming off a tough loss against the Rams because they were the better team. All Detroit has to do is win out for the rest of the year. And I think Jamar, Sonic, and Knuckles will definitely become the greatest running back duo for the first time in a while. Now, as for Pittsburgh, we've seen this with TJ Watt, similar to Aaron Judge. You know how cahoots with both greatest franchises but never won a championship since 2009. Like the Steelers are more comparable to the New York Yankees because they haven't won a championship since 2009. Sure, they may have won AL East, AFC North champion of division titles, but they always have playoff disappointments. Considering how they evenly match, but the only differential is that the Yankees made it to the World Series last year. The Steelers hasn't made it to the AFC Championship since 2017. In fact, both teams, it's a match made in heaven. In 2017, they made it to the ALCS since then. And since then, they haven't won one championship since then. But considering how Pittsburgh's defense is consistent, is bad on the defensive end in terms of the running game, but ultimately the Lions will come out victorious. The 9-8 Steelers are officially in.
Yes, and I think obviously the Detroit Lions, despite the loss, they've had a really good. They put up a good fight on offense, and even in some of the Lions' losses we've seen against the Packers and the Rams, they put up a valiant fight but just fell short. And with the Steelers' run defense being atrocious and the Lions having the best running back duo in the NFL, give me them to have a field day against them. And not to mention, if you wear out the run game, you wear out their pass game too. So I feel like the Lions will run up the score against the Steelers and ultimately beat them. And the Steelers, they got to wait just at least another week or two before they get that 9th win. So give me the Lions to come out, play like their season's on the line.
And that's exactly why the winner of the AFC North is going to come down between the Ravens and the Steelers in the next couple weeks. This is no-brainer. Texans versus Raiders. Technically, Kenny Pickett was awful. I forgot to tell you that. Remember how I said Max Brosmer was terrible? Kenny Pickett was awful. The way how they played against y'all when he got y'all Super Bowl, when he returned, yikes. He didn't even bother scoring a single point. They didn't even have a field goal and a touchdown. And to top it all off, I honestly feel bad for Genty at that point. Because the Texans defense, good luck with that. And with CJ Stroud now back on the team, all Texans had to do was win out. And that's pretty much it. Texans over Raiders.
And now you just said it. The Raiders didn't score a single point against my team, the Philadelphia Eagles. Not even a field goal. If it would have been the Raiders this year, 25 Raiders playing against the 25 Eagles offense, 23 Eagles defense with this side Patricia transition, the Raiders would have at least gotten some points on the board. The Eagles still would have won the game. But in 2025, they got nothing. Now they're going against the Houston Texans, who people finally realize have a great defense. You think good luck with the Raiders trying to move the ball against that team and get something going. Your best shot is just getting points, period. So bottom line, I take the Texans to win this game. And the Raiders defense isn't that much better either. So give me the Texans to blow out the Raiders. No,
I kid
only
you
people
not.
that will enjoy this are Texan fans.
I kid you not. Next week is going to come down who wins the Tank Bowl where we play the Raiders. Next up, we have the greatest matchup for the first time in a long time. The New England Patriots versus the Baltimore Ravens. Rematch of the 2011 and 2012 AFC Championship. The Patriots. Well, it's going to be close, I could say. Lamar Jackson is playing like his caliber MVPs ever since he came back. Drake May was coming off a very tough loss against the Bills, considering how the defense, how we saw with the Bengals and Bills. Considering how this played out, I could see this as a one lopsided by the second half. If the Ravens defense wins out of the entire division, which I think it will be possible, but not too possible, all they have to do is have the Steelers lose to the Lions, and they could potentially be 2 spots back of the AFC North. But considering against that defense with Christian Gonzalez and Trayvon Henderson with Stephon Diggs, the Ravens were more likely than lost the plot. Patriots over Ravens.
Yep, I got to say, yeah, I got the Patriots in this one. Wow. I mean, the Ravens are still fighting for their playoff spots, and they theoretically still have a shot. I got to go with the Patriots in this one. They're clearly the better, well-rounded team here. And the Ravens, it's just one of those things where the wheels have started to come off, and now they've fallen down to being a pretty middle-of-the-pack team. So give me the Patriots, because even in that loss to Buffalo, the Patriots still put up 31 points, and that Drake May still looks like the real deal. So give me them to upend the Ravens. And now this next game.
Monday Night Football on the holidays is the favorite time of the year. This is going to be no-brainer between the San Francisco 49ers versus the Indianapolis Colts. Well, Phillip Rivers was coming off a tough loss against the Seahawks. They did play well. And considering how the 49ers played out, I would consider this as a one lopsided. If Brock Purdy, Mac Jones if Brock Purdy or Mac Jones starts, you still got Christian McCaffrey, you still got George Kittle, you still got a solid defense and a solid offense. But considering how Jonathan Taylor played out with Tyler Warren, I could see this as a close game, but low scoring. Colts over 49ers.
That's an interesting one because I'll have to disagree with that. I think the 49ers, I mean, all the momentum's headed in their direction going into this one. You still got McCaffrey. You still got Kittle. You still got a solid offense there. And for the Colts, it's a nice attempt by Philip Rivers to come back. But after being away for 5 years in your mid-40s, it's just not going to work out that well. So give me the Niners to get this win and keep momentum going.
You know, my dad said this. Don't sleep on the Colts because they have an underrated defense.
Yep, there you go. And before I close the screen, I just for the NBA fans, I just wanted to put the score box up there so you guys can follow along during the last couple minutes while we're still talking about football. Colts underrated defense.
Of course, you still got the Emirates NBA Cup. Is the cup cup finals for the Knicks and the Spurs. The rematch of the 1999 NBA Finals. If I remember correctly, that NBA Finals was the greatest NBA Finals for Tim Duncan's career. He said
that was
Detroit basketball.
The first.
Because San Antonio was the better team in that 2005, which I consider the 2005 NBA Finals one of the worst. The 2002 NBA Finals was clearly one lopsided, and the 2003 NBA Finals was just not even good enough because Jason Kidd couldn't even help out his defense. And considering how the New Jersey Nets before they moved to Brooklyn was one of the few good teams, and that defense with Kenyon Martin, Kerry Kittles, and Jason Kidd and Richard Jefferson, that was an amazing defense.
Yep, and that's it. But now times have changed. Now Spurs and Knicks. Spurs are on the comeback after a few years down. You got Wemby, Devin Vassell, De'Aaron Fox. You got Dylan Harper, still a rookie, but you got Julian Champagne. You got a variety of options on that team. And now that the Spurs have a true team around them, now you see how well they're doing. In the Knicks, you got Karl-Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby. You got some good depth there, and this could potentially be a finals preview. Potentially.
Yeah, I could see that happening, but considering how Detroit basketball turned out for the past couple of years has been very underwhelming. But now they're actually a strong team in the Central Conference, in the Central Division. Sorry, NBA Central. Considering how Detroit played out with Cade Cunningham, looks amazing. But now onto the hot takes. Come down the wire for next week. This is going to determine who wins the Tank Bowl. This is going to determine who wins division in each respective leagues. And this is going to determine who is going to clinch the playoff spot before they miss out with a winning or losing record. For my take for the Giants versus Vikings, Aaron Jones could go off. Tyrone Tracy could do the same, but I think Jackson Dart will throw less picks than J.J. McCarthy. If J.J. McCarthy decides to throw interceptions like he once did before the second half surge, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough in terms of that. They're already out of the playoffs in terms of Bears beating the Browns, and on top of all that, the Giants is going to put up at least a fight in the second half. Now, for the kicking position, I mentioned Justin Tucker. Before the allegations he had, he was he was the second highest paid kicker in the league. He gave the Ravens multiple chances of division, right, in the AFC divisional round and the AFC championship at one point, but ultimately coming up short against them. But considering how Detroit been playing for the Lions, I could see them going to the final spot if they win out the next couple weeks. For my second hot take, for this Eagles versus Commanders, we've seen the NFC Championship rematch last year. This was a feel-good story I mentioned weeks ago with the Commanders. Now this year, they fell from grace. Not because they consider how the oldest team in the league, but they potentially had multiple injuries, including Austin Eckler. So I would say Saquon Barkley would have more touchdowns than Christian McCaffrey as of this week. My third hot take, I don't want to wait until Black Monday for either Kevin Stefanski or Pete Carroll gone, because the fact that they're both considered one of the great coaches in their respective leagues, but Pete Carroll made that Seahawks team a lot better. But ultimately, it came to an expiring date when he resigned as head coach, ultimately becoming a advisor to the Raiders head coach, which I thought, in my opinion, is one of the greatest moves the Raiders did since they got rid of Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce, which, by the way, I hope Antonio Pierce comes to the Giants as a defensive coordinator. Number four hot take. I could accept the fact that Jackson Dart could be a future quarterback to be reckoned with if he doesn't take that much hits and concussions. And hold on, Stefanski's not going anywhere, I don't think. I highly doubt it, because they're gonna terminate it by Black Monday, considering how they drafted two quarterbacks in the same draft. At the top of the loft, they're wasting Myles Garrett's career. You could say that John Harbaugh's not going anywhere if they decide to move on from him. Now, as I was saying before about Jackson, he's going to be a really good quarterback for the future if he doesn't take that much concussions. So far, he's been taking 10 concussions. If he continues to have concussions, he could potentially be out in the league by the next 2 or 3 years. Number 5, well, let's just say number 5. I could say that the Broncos are inevitable. It wasn't Stefanski's fault. I understand that. First off, it wasn't really Stefanski's fault, though, but considering how they played bad offense and defense the past couple of years, ever since that 2023 playoff appearance, it wasn't enough against the Texans, because the Texans were a far better team. Number 5, the Broncos I mentioned were good. The Patriots are now looking like a resurgence team. The Bills could potentially win the division on their final year at Orchard Park at their stadium, in Highmark Stadium. And the last one I want to mention is that the Jets, well, by the way, one of the Jets fans came here and said, where is it? Yeah, he said, "Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Chris, I'm sorry to say it, but your Jets are really one of the worst New York teams in the entire sports league. Rather it's the Mets, rather it's the Jets, rather it's the Nets or the Islanders, they are officially the worst team in New York. Period." Bonus take. Joe Schoen should be terminated by Black Monday if they don't find the right coach. Sure, he made that trip. He didn't have Saquon Barkley as their franchise star player, but they overpaid Danny Dimes of Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley. And considering how the GM tenders turns out, his drafting were hit and misses. Malik Neighbors was a hit. Deontay Banks was a miss. Jalen Hyatt was a miss. John Michael Schmitz was mixed. And on top of it all off, if this continues, I'm going to say that at this point, they may as well just do it. They may as well just do it by Black Monday, because considering how you should look forward to now that you addressed the quarterback situation, you already addressed the running back position with Cam Scatterboo, and you already addressed the running back wide receiver position. I would be shocked if the Giants pass on Cardell Tate, Caleb Downs, or Reese from Ohio State. 3 Ohio State players I mentioned. I would be surprised if they actually drafted Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. And for the head coach position, it's going to come down between 2 head coaches. It's going to be Chris Shula or Marcus Freeman. A lot of people saying that Marcus Freeman to the Giants would be, I don't know, considering how he did in Notre Dame. But as a Notre Dame fan, he's mixed. He can give you multiple winning seasons and playoff appearances. But at the same time, when it comes to big games such as Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, you can name every elite college teams in football. Exactly. They don't need a running back. You can name every elite college football teams like Miami, like Penn State, like Georgia, like you can name every elite college football teams on that same league in same country, and they still come up short. They haven't won a national championship since '88, and since then, Notre Dame has been up and down. So considering how Marcus Freeman will turn out to be the Giants, I think this is one familiar coach we're familiar with, and that's Cliff Kingsbury. Remember how Cliff Kingsbury came from Texas Tech when he coached Patrick Mahomes? He coached Patrick Mahomes, and he failed in college and got fired for it, would ultimately get terminated on Black Monday and would be fired for it. So everyone knew that Cliff Kingsbury was a hack except for Arizona. If Marcus Freeman does the same thing with the Giants in terms of wasting Jackson Dart's career, I highly doubt it. But I would say for the final one, for after this offseason, when the offseason hits and Black Monday happens, give me Marcus Freeman. Because I could think he could take accountability, and he coach, he could have the motive, he could motivate the team, he could help the Giants reach back to the playoffs. And on top of all that, the defense could potentially be elite if they hire the right pieces. So they're a head coach, a receiver, an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, and a GM away for becoming the next NFC East contender online behind the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right. So for me, I'm going to start this off. First hot take. The Mike McDaniel experiment is over for the Miami Dolphins. You had your chance. First off season, it looked like it was going to work out. You got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. You had an exciting offense. But flash forward a few years later, 2025, what's happening? The Dolphins are out of the playoffs, not even making it for the second straight season. And not to mention, Tua, basically on his last legs as a player. They failed to protect Tua through the Mike McDaniel era, and they couldn't capitalize on their potential. So to me, it's over. You got to start fresh, go back to the drawing board, get a new coach, and you got to, with all due respect to Tua, start looking for a long-term answer that you feel is more durable at quarterback, because how much longer do you really got with Tua? Even this season when he did play, you saw signs that his accuracy was falling off and that he got his bell rung one too many times. Number two hot take, going to a Florida team. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are closer to a rebuild than they are getting back into contention. They've become complacent since that Super Bowl win. From that 2022 season on now, they've been winning the division as a relatively mediocre team in an overall bad NFC South. Usually that results in them getting bounced in the opening round, minus them beating the collapsing 2023 Eagles. It happened Tom Brady's final year against the Cowboys. They had that 1 year they beat the collapsing Eagles, but then turned around and lost to the Lions. Baker had a poor performance. And last year against the Commanders, they fell short. Now this year, it could come down to either them or the Panthers, but even if they do end up winning the division again, what's going to happen most likely? One and done against the number 5 seed, whomever that may be. So that's the second hot take. Third hot take. J.J. McCarthy, with more time to develop, could become a solid starter. That still remains to be determined. But I do think some people overreacted to a few of his poor performances early, and I think there's still a chance. We'll just have to wait and see how that goes out. So that's another one right there.
Pause on that. Considering how people glazing on J.J. McCarthy becoming the best quarterback was never the best idea. And by the way, my dad said Tua is not going anywhere. They owe him $100 million for the next 2 years. Exactly. Do you remember that extension that the Dolphins made?
Yep, they're in a tough spot right now in terms of what they are going to have to do. So that's right there. My next hot take is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have ran their course. They're stuck in the same spot. I used to think years ago that the calls for Mike Tomlin to be fired were a bit silly, but even with them winning 9 games, you can't just keep being the same team every single season. Eventually, you're going to have to do something different. And don't get me wrong, there have been teams that have let go of coaches despite being a winning team, and they're actually better off in the long term. Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tony Dungy. Actually, both sides, Dungy and Tampa, were better off in the long term. Tampa won that Super Bowl favorable situation against the Raiders, and Dungy got to go to Indianapolis with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Peyton Manning and win a Super Bowl there. So that ends up being a win-win for the departed coach and the organization. Look at the Broncos.
And not just that, but John Gruden was part of that team. John Gruden was part of that team before he got departed to the Raiders.
Right. And not to mention, yep, that was where it played out perfectly. And then they also see the Broncos. They got rid of John Fox after a loss to the Colts in the 2014 divisional round, hired Gary Kubiak, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl the next season. So sometimes a winning team parting ways with coaches can work out for the better in the long term. I think the Steelers,
in fact, it worked out for the Commanders. Speaking of hot, here's a 6 hot take I want to mention. We mentioned Washington had a really great season last year with Jaden Daniels becoming Offensive Rookie of the Year. We mentioned Dan Quinn becoming the best coach. But sometimes when it comes to defensive teams like these with Washington having a great season for one and they falling from grace from another, sometimes projects don't work. The moral is sometimes that projects don't work because this is lit. I'm starting to think that if the Commanders does fall off another year with this oldest team, my advice, I said earlier, was that draft younger players for development purposes. If the Commanders does that, they have a shot to win, to go back to the playoffs like they did last season. And to top it all off, projects don't work in terms of some coaches that we know familiar. Dan Quinn with Kyle Shanahan from the Falcons. That was a project that Ryan had before he went to the Colts and retired. That played out perfectly, ultimately choking in the Super Bowl against the Patriots in the second half. And for Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn, like I said before, projects don't work. The offense needs to step up in terms of getting the right schemes, running the right play calls, and right exit. That's it. If they do that, if they do what needs to be done in terms of drafting younger players and draft capital, I could see that happening. But that Deebo Samuel trade for the 49ers really screwed them over.
Yeah, big time. And my next hot take is going to be that the Rams will ultimately win the NFC and have home field advantage in the playoffs for the NFC, and for the AFC, it'll be the Denver Broncos. Momentum's in the right direction for both organizations. You got the Rams. They went all in for the Super Bowl. They won it. They did have a few years where they fell down, but they're starting to get talent back. They got still got Sean McVay, who's still one of the best coaches in the NFL, who's still in touch with the times on how to coach the NFL. And Matthew Stafford, he's still there. You got to do it now while he can. And plus, like I said, you got a really good roster now. You started over again, and this could be their year to possibly make a Super Bowl run. We'll have to see how that goes, but they'll definitely win the NFC. In the AFC, Denver Broncos, perfect. You got the perfect young quarterback, the right coach, the right guys on defense. Everything's working out in the momentum. They will win the AFC and host the home playoff game. How they do come playoff time remains to be determined, but I got them as the 2 respective home field advantage teams this year.
I kid you not. You know what's familiar that we saw with the Saints with Sean Payton? We saw this familiar with Sean Payton with Drew Brees. They won the Super Bowl in 2009.
Yeah, we've seen that happen before. So, and the next hot take in this one is the one thing that's holding the Houston Texans back from being a contender is CJ Stroud not getting back to rookie form. He's had his flashes of brilliance since, but we haven't seen him dominate the same way we did his rookie season. Even this year, earlier in the season, we saw some struggles. Now the defense has caught on. They started winning games. They're a really good team, but the one thing they need to be contenders is to get CJ Stroud back to dominating.
And not just CJ Stroud dominating, but considering how CJ Stroud's been playing for the past couple weeks, has been exquisitely amazing. Now, as for the Indianapolis Colts, they had a feel-good story. They were on a resurgence, but ultimately came crashing down to a wire where their wheels came off, and boom. Anthony Richardson is on the IR. Daniel Jones is out for the year for the first time in 2 years, and the top of the loft, they got Phillip Rivers. So my advice to them, if they don't find the right quarterback besides those guys, I would be shocked if the Colts decided to extend him. But they should consider finding the right quarterback for those who have really good talent, like Drew Allar. That's from Penn State. Drew Allar is a solid player. Garrett Nussmeier is a solid player, but he's not elite. But if the Colts can have the right pieces and Daniel Jones comes back healthy, they have officially found the right pieces. The Panthers. You mentioned earlier the Panthers with Bryce Young if they win out for the division, the NFC South. If the Panthers win out of the NFC South, there are an offensive coordinator away from becoming a contender like we saw with Cam Newton in 2015. But ultimately, they wasted his career. We mentioned the Giants, we mentioned the Vikings, we mentioned my next one is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles needs to get their heads together. They need to get their heads in the game in terms of the play calling, the schemes, the defense. They're great. Vic Fangio did an excellent job defending. But Kevin Patullo really needs to step up. Because I don't like the Philadelphia Eagles scheme doing for the past couple games before the Raiders game. On offense, they were struggling. They were struggling majorly. And potentially they were losing in winnable games such as the Chargers, they lost. The Cowboys, they lost because I mentioned that Cowboys offense was perfectly balanced. And the top of the loft, they lost to the Giants, which was an embarrassment. And they were overhyping, saying that they were going to be the better blowout team. But ultimately, it was the exact opposite. Considering how Jackson Dart played in primetime on Thursday was absolutely amazing. I never seen Jackson Dart played amazing on Thursday night in his rookie year. Same thing with the Chargers. He did the same thing against the Chargers. Look how that turned out. The schemes and play calling were great. It's not that great, but the defense really needs to step up before Shane Bowen got fired. And to top it all off, that Eagles defense gave up too many yards. And Zach Bond got run over by Cam Scott, which I was shocked about. Because we talked about how Cam Scott was compared to he was compared to Peyton Hills, but in reality, I compared him to Mike Allstott. I compared him to Mike Allstott because he's a fullback, and he came from Purdue. He was running over every single defender. Cam Scottaboo is one of the greatest running backs we had in this draft. I know Ashton Jeanty had great moments, but considering how Cam Scottaboo before he got hurt, he had some really great moments, especially helping out, making some plays. But for the Philadelphia Eagles, when they repeat this year, get your head together. Do not disappoint the football gods. Do not disappoint the NFC East like you did 2 years ago. So my advice to your team, get your head together. That's it.
And I'm going to say this on the final note. Some few early Black Monday predictions. I got Zach Taylor, Pete Carroll as the main two obvious ones. If the Bucs don't win the division, they might part ways with Todd Bowles and go in a new direction. But that depends on whether they win the division or not. But I can definitely say Pete Carroll, Zach Taylor for sure. I even got Kevin Stefanski too, because it would be Browns usually. This is actually a surprise that Stefanski's lasted this long, because usually coaches are out 3 years at best with the Browns.
They should have waited for Black Monday. Like Brian Dable should be terminated by Black Monday, but ultimately they lost to the Bears. Same with Shane Bowen. They should have waited until after the Broncos game. But my next coach I have on your list is a general manager, Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen should be the next one. Mike Kafka should be the next one. If the Baltimore Ravens lose out, they should fire John Harbaugh. Think about this. We already know John Harbaugh's not going in. That I could agree with. But he's under contract. If they decided to pull the plug and terminate him, the Giants head coaching candidates could heat up. But I don't see that happening.
At this point, it just needs to be what we're going to do next. And so, hey, we still got a ways to go. We got to get through week 16, see who actually does win or lose. We gave our predictions, but we got to see the games played, and we'll see how this affects the playoff standings going forward. I'm pretty sure at least one more team will clinch a playoff spot, if not 2 or 3 officially, but we just got to wait to see, let it play out.
And considering how I mentioned the Tank Bowl, it's going to come down to week 17 by the Raiders, Giants, Tennessee, and Saints, and a few other teams that could potentially win out. So if I was the Giants, lose out for the rest of the year, try to secure the number 1 pick and trade down to get extra draft capital, a haul, and potentially a star wide receiver if they don't draft one. If they do, go to at least 1 or 2 teams. I would say either the Raiders or the Jets. The Jets will be a good candidate. If I had to choose the Jets, this is my trade proposal. The New York Giants will trade the number 1 pick to the New York Jets, the 7th overall pick, for this year's 2nd round pick, this year's 1st round pick, next year's 1st round pick, a 3rd round pick, and potentially Garrett Wilson if the Jets decides to waste him even further. And for the Giants, I'm going to send at least 1 or 2 players to them.
Yep, but oh man, that's going to give us a lot to talk about during the NFL offseason. But first, the road to the NFL. First, the past couple weeks leads to the road to the NFL playoffs. The playoffs lead to the road to the Super Bowl. We're going to have Super Bowl 60 in February. It's going to be historic just for that reason alone, that we made it to the 60th Super Bowl.
Man, it's been 60 years since the NFL established, huh? And to be honest with you, I'm going to say one final thing before we wrap this up. And to top it all off, the Giants and Eagles should definitely get their heads together. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for watching. I am your co-host, AJ Warrior X with Nicky Stees. Until next time, goodbye, my friends. Good night, everybody.
See y'all later.